We've seen 2 days of strike action in the last week, but we are told to anticipate another full-blown strike that could involve other members of other unions in the coming days. What's the likelihood of that happening?
Yes, the current situation as we stand is that we had a 2-day strike, and we gave the administration, the government, 7 days to reconsider their positions. And in the meantime, we continue to mobilize with an intention, in the likelihood that the government doesn't come to the table with a better offer. We'll be going on a full-blown strike from next week, Tuesday.
Okay. Now, let's talk about what it is that you are requiring. 8.6% increase in wages across the board, housing allowance of 1,000 rands. The state has said, you know, by current indications, they can only afford an increase of 6.5% and a housing allowance of 620 rands.
Yeah, well, depending on from which point you're looking at, I think we're dealing with government as an employer, and the state is one. And the trends in other areas of the state, including parastatals and so forth, the settlement range, which is predetermined by government, not by the unions, is between 8% and 11%. Right. So basically, when we demanded 11%, that was our original demand. But we then reduced our demand to 8.6% to be in line with what they have determined. So the 8.6% that we are requiring is what they've already given the rest of the public service.
All right, now the state continues to argue a case of inflation and affordability. And according to the budget for 2010, in personal expenses to be paid, they've already allocated 23 billion rands plus an extra 3 billion to meet the union's demands. So they had anticipated this and they've made provision for it, but that's all they can afford. Yeah,
well, from that amount of money that you have mentioned, I'm not sure how much of it will be going to the directors and CEOs of parastatals, because the chunk of the money, really speaking, doesn't go to the ordinary employees in the public service. And if you look at the cost of living, especially the lowest paid employees in the public service, the cost of living has risen between 25% and 30%. And basically, their salaries, it can only afford food and traveling to work. So the cost of living increment, it's a generally accepted principle between us and the government that it will be CPIX plus real wage increase. And the real wage increase is that 3.5% that we are requiring.
What about the fact that this government has just emerged from a recession and is in deficit at about 7% of GDP, and to the extent that businesses are not expanding and creating jobs, a lot of the unemployed and a lot of the responsibility of creating jobs and keeping jobs afloat is falling on the state. The burdens of just keeping the system going and the welfare networks going is a burden on the state, and they can't incur these costs.
Yeah, well, that argument, I don't know how is it going to hold when they've managed to pay the salary increments for the other institutions of the state. So if maybe us as the public service unions were coming up with something that is not an accepted principle, I would say that maybe that argument would work. But currently, we're not convinced that the reasons that are mooted by government are legitimate reasons, as they have managed to pay Transnet 11%. They've managed to pay South African Revenue Services employees between 8 and 9%. And on full package, this 8.6% that we are requiring is only on salary, not on the rest of the benefits. So if you look at those increments, basically it's way more than the actual percentage that they got.
We were having a conversation here earlier on with the guest host and the commentator, and one of the points that was made was, you know, everybody deserves an above inflation wage and a better living wage. But as taxpayers, we need to see better performance on the part of the public service. And with the exception of a few, the civil service doesn't work and perform very well.
Yes, we must accept that there has been problems in the public service. That is there to be seen. But over a couple of months and years, there's been vast improvement Look at the highly criticized department like Home Affairs in terms of their turnaround times. There's vast improvements. And again, Lerato, you need to take cognizance of the fact that we have contributed immensely during the World Cup. These gains, we could have been like Transnet and went on strike. We had an opportunity, but we chose to be patriotic and worked ourselves up to make sure that we try and raise the economy of the country, which we have achieved. So I don't see any reason why we can be accused of anything now when we really came to the party. And during the World Cup, it was one of the best performance of the public service ever. So I think we deserve to be recognized for that contribution that we have made to the economy.